than many scientists in all their collective careers could have hoped to do.
And action!
Here we were in New Zealand, and we were just finishing up our work, and as we were saying our goodbyes on the set, the stunt coordinator came up and said, the stunt team has something that they'd like to give you. And I turned around, and here they all were, these New Zealand stunt guys. Some were Maori, some were not Maori, but they were all New Zealanders, and they had all worked on this haka. And of course, the haka is a ceremony that is used before battle, but it can also be used as a way of showing someone your respect. And they started the haka. And what this haka does, if translated, is it challenges you to continue to do your best. And that was their way of saying, New Zealand thanks you for bringing this project here and for making us a part of it. And it was a very, very emotional moment. And they handed me the taiaha, which is the ceremonial staff. And it was very funny because my driver, Grant Roa, was standing next to me coaching me because he's Maori. And he said, don't break eye contact when they bring you the taiaha. Do not look away. And I said, or what? What are the consequences of that? But I think that the Maori, especially, that worked with us on the film, really felt like the film was making a statement that somehow represented their past, their culture, and this meant a lot to them as Indigenous people working on this film. And I have to say, these stunt guys, I mean, they really they gave us their all. I mean, there's such a great spirit there in New Zealand working with them, just the craftsmanship that they bring, the energy they bring, the excitement in each one of these highly excellent and professional artisans in New Zealand, but they still have that passion to do great work.
We'll be back. All right.
So after my experience in New Zealand and my connection with the Maori people there, I thought, wow, we should incorporate something of this into the Na'vi culture. So I asked for their permission, and in fact, what they allowed to happen was the writing of a new haka that incorporated some of the Na'vi themes and ideas. And so they created a whole new haka, and 4 New Zealand stunt guys practiced it, and they came over to LA, and we actually captured it. Now, in the fullness of time, it turned out that the film was way too long, and there just wasn't time for it. There wasn't room for it. But we did the capture, and it's quite remarkable.
E ai o te rākau tau matua, tēnei au te taki atu nei o te kao o te riri e, kupu i anoa tua whakarere. Ka kapatironga e, ka kapatiraro e, whakarongo mai ki e nei kupu, anga tamara e, o te pariri e! Mairanga te ati tupua! Mairanga te ati taniwha! Mairanga te ati nahi e! Iko te rangi, pangaru e te wharua, heke te taua, te uru, tapua iwa e! Mairanga te ati tahito, i te kopu, parapara! Te uru tipua, e tu te kura, takamuna e! Pepe e la oki, hei te ati, ngāti e ora e! Ka patua tatu, watarangi, toi tu, te whanua, toi tu, te iwi ki uku e! Takau tāna! Heke tonu, au e ka whiua te ika! I te ati, ki te umu, kera e!
All right. Shot will be determined by the motion.
Right.
You want to see the foot coming down. Am I there or am I
You're on
there?
the floor, right.
We realized very quickly that the editing was going to kill us. It was the nature of the work, but that wasn't clear going into it. I was having to take days off in the middle of the shooting schedule to edit. So we said, wait, we can't do this. We can't have the actors standing around while we're editing. So we hired John Rafua, and then we hired Steve Rifkin a couple months later. And I had to teach them, bring them up to speed on what I had learned.
One of the unique things about this process was that the film had to be edited 2 times.
So a lot of movies, you go out and the first thing that you do, you set up the shot, what it's going to be, a close-up or a medium shot or whatever it is.
And action.
Then you work with the performances to work for that shot. But the way Jim did this, which is really something different, is that on the performance capture stage, all he had to worry about was just basically the performances, without worrying about whether the light is right, whether the camera angle is correct, whether it's in focus or any of that. None of that he had to worry about at all. Just performance, performance, performance. You wonder, well, if he didn't have any shots, then how is it that we as editors could tell what the performance was?
And action!
For that purpose, he had people rolling reference cameras.
Each of them was assigned to a particular actor. There were some reference cameras that covered wider so that you could see their body motion. But Jim was primarily concerned with getting a good, clean reference of their face.
And this was just a record of what the performance was. It wasn't the actual shot, it was just a record of it so we could tell what the actor did without having to open a huge computer file to figure it out.
Sometimes when people see this reference camera, they think that's the performance capture. That is not the performance capture. That is a video reference of what the many cameras on the ceiling of the volume captured.
It was the longest time before they really sort of got the idea that you cut the performance, but you can't say, okay, I'm going to close up here and then I'm on a wide shot, because I might not do that. Don't try to cut the scene. Try to imagine what the shots might be later when I go direct those shots. They were going crazy. I said, look, it's Zen editing. You're editing without shots.
This is a place for prayers to be heard.
We would go through with Jim and select certain preferred readings and then start to build what we called a load for each scene. This would consist of preferred performances from each of the actors.
We call this Utraya Mokri, the tree of voices, the voices of our ancestors.
So this is a very simple construct of a 2-character scene. Here's an example of a scene that almost broke the system. The volume was capable of capturing perhaps 10 or 12 characters at a time. So the crowd was captured in tiles or quadrants, if you will.
Normally, as editors, we don't have to worry about what crowd performances to pick, but in this movie, we had to actually go through and pick the crowd performances. Once you pick the performances, then that is the performance that's going to be used.
After all that performance capture work and all the performance editing and everything that it took to prepare these scene loads, we now had to generate the actual shots that we were going to cut with.
Let's do a take.
Okay, roll video. Ready?
And playback.
There's no actors present on the set, and he's out there with this virtual camera playing back their performances from sometimes months before.
Okay. Again, please.
Shooting as many times as he wants. The actors will always be perfect because it's the selected performance.
Cut.
At this point, he's no longer concerned with getting the performance.
Action.
He's all about the environment, the way the shot design is coming together, the lighting, the props. If he needs a tree moved closer, he can do it. If he wants to move a mountain, he can do that.
Yeah. Beautiful things.
So he's had the freedom of working exclusively with the actors to get their performance. Now he has the freedom to exclusively work on shot design.
And cut. Save that, please.
We had to get every shot exactly perfect, the way it needed to be in the final film. And this is where it was done. This was really, in a funny way, one of the most creative parts of the process, because this is where I was making up the shots. I had my actors' performances, and they were wonderful, and we had worked so hard on those. But now we're figuring out, what's a close-up, what's a wide shot, what's a helicopter shot, what's a dolly shot.
Playback.
This is what he sees in his virtual camera when he's shooting. The actual facial capture is too complex to map onto these characters. So this is kind of a low-res version of what would ultimately be finished. The camera moves themselves are being recorded and adhered to through the entire finishing process. Now, we finally have the normal dailies that you would have to cut a scene.
This is a place for prayers to be heard.
And this is all getting streamed right into our Avids while we're on the stage, so we can actually take this footage at the level that it's at and build and edit while he's shooting.
And he would come over and say, oh, let's see what you got so far. And then he'd start building on that.
Let's add a shot here. Let's do a close-up here or a bridging shot.
There's this interaction with the director, but not in a director's cut. It's actually while you're shooting.
For editors, we never get that chance. We're always, seeing what they did and maybe thinking, well, maybe they could have done this, maybe they could have done that, but we were there while it was being created.
We had a great breakthrough when that started happening, and then it just became the norm. We were always cutting while he was shooting.
And then, of course, we put the scenes together and we'd turn them over to Weta.
One of the wonderful things that happened is that when the render would come through as a final and you'd see the glint in an eye or that little crooked smile that you had selected a year and a half before, and you go, my God, that's just amazing that the actor's performance is coming through.
But I just want to say thanks.
When I came on the show, Jim said to me, we're all learning from each other. We're just making this stuff up as we go along. It kind of evolved and we learned from each other and found a way that was efficient in terms of how to approach this, what had never been approached before.
Yeah, we figured it out pretty well by the end of the movie.